It's an honor to address this forum, which brings together two of the things my predecessor and mentor, Secretary Madeleine Albright, cared about most: the nation of Kosovo and empowering women. President Osmani, thank you for convening this summit. We're grateful as well to the many organizing partners, including the National Democratic Institute, an institution that was very close to the Secretary's heart. When asked in her later years the achievement she was proudest of from her decades of service, Secretary Albright always gave the same answer: Kosovo. So much of what she believed in and dedicated her life to achieving is reflected in this nation's struggle for independence, its ongoing efforts to build a peaceful, secure, democratic country in which all people, including women and girls, can participate equally and fully. That last idea was, of course, at the core of the landmark UN Security Council Resolution 1325, which affirms the critically important role of women in all aspects of maintaining and promoting peace and security, a resolution Secretary Albright championed as U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations. But more than any commitment on paper, 1325 was something Secretary Albright embodied and sought to make real every day, whether she was engaging with leaders at the highest level of government or meeting the people whose lives had been upended by war and by violence. A big part of why she believed in Resolution 1325 was because of her lived experience. As a staffer, and later as a stateswoman, she'd spent much of her professional career in discussions where she was the only woman at the table. And whether she was in the UN Security Council, or at peace talks, or the White House Situation Room, she consistently saw what was lost through the lack of diversity in perspectives and backgrounds. Decades earlier, as a child, she'd been forced from her home in Czechoslovakia twice, first by the Nazis, years later by the Communists, and lived through the Blitz in London, hiding in shelters as bombs fell overhead. That was one of the reasons she empathized so deeply with the refugees she met as a diplomat, including those displaced from Kosovo, whom she visited in camps in Macedonia in 1999. In those girls and boys, she saw herself. It wasn't only experiences of hardship that shaped her, but also of hope. Secretary Albright fought for engaging women in all aspects of peacebuilding and security decision-making, in part because she'd seen the difference it made when they were given a voice. Whether those women were peace negotiators or peacekeepers, humanitarian workers or human rights defenders, whether they worked in diplomacy or defense, the process and outcomes were better for their participation. She saw that in the generations of women that she mentored, several of whom are America's leading diplomats today, including Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman and the United States Ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas Greenfield. And she saw it in the rising women leaders she made a point of encouraging around the world, including in Kosovo. When Secretary Albright spoke to Kosovo's parliament in 2005, she said the country's future would come down, in no small part, to the opportunities afforded to its women. And she asked, will they be given an equal chance to excel in the classroom, to succeed in the workplace, to pursue their dreams in whatever field of endeavor they might choose, to become business people or doctors, journalists or computer programmers, even future presidents and prime ministers of Kosovo? In the time since, Kosovo has elected 2 women presidents, 2 more than the United States, I might add. And I know that Secretary Albright would be encouraged looking out at all the women leaders in this audience, from the region and from around the world. So too, she'd be encouraged by the women leading the charge for equal rights and opportunities in places where they're most fiercely repressed, like the Iranian women who've come out into the streets to protest since the killing of Mahsa Amini, or the Damas de Blanco, the ladies in white, who continue to lead protests in Cuba, calling for the regime to respect human rights and meet people's basic needs. Women who stand up knowing it could cost them their freedom, even their lives. I'm confident that, were she here, Secretary Albright would also remind us of how much work we still have to do. As this forum takes place, Europe is again racked by war. Like many of you, as I look out on President Putin's brutal war on Ukraine, on the millions displaced, most of them women and children, on the atrocities committed in places like Bucha and Irpin, it's impossible not to see the echoes of conflicts that racked this region over 2 decades ago. As we meet this challenge, I think often of what my predecessor would do. The wonderful part is that Secretary Albright left us with clear instructions. She was consistently reminding us of the importance of standing up to tyrants and bullies, and of preventing any country from using force to redraw the borders of another, and defending the principles of the UN Charter and international law. Here's what she said on her last visit to Pristina in 2019, and I quote, "The war in Kosovo was a confrontation between barbaric killing and necessary force, between vicious intolerance and respect for human rights, between tyranny and democracy. We prevailed because our alliance was unified and strong. Most important, we succeeded because our cause was right and because of the people of Kosovo." All of that is true today, and as long as we remember it and stick to it, I'm confident we'll prevail again.